how are you doing today? I hope you're having a wonderful day. Today we're going to be talking about a topic that can get people really fired up and have a strong opinion about HOAs. Homeowners associations, property owners associations, there's also bills of assurance, BOAs, all the OAs. So we're going to get into that and find out where the OAs, the HOAs, the BOAs are in Arkansas, in my north central area that I work in. Because there are a few, but for the most part there is no HOAs. So when you see a listing show up that you might be interested in, especially in our area, it's going to depend on how the agent enters it into the MLS. When I put a property in the MLS that I have listed for sale, there's two sections that I can put taxes into. There's the county taxes, and then there's an assessment. So in Cherokee Village, for example, there's county taxes, which everybody has throughout the county, throughout the state. You're going to have county taxes. The other section is an assessment. Now, Cherokee Village, Horseshoe Bend, Ozark Acres all have SID, Suburban Improvement District, and that is an assessment on the property. It's not a tax because it's not voted on. The commissioners decide what that assessment is. So it looks like sometimes it comes through as an HOA, but it's not an HOA because the Suburban Improvement District does not impose restrictions on the property owners who have property within Cherokee Village, Horseshoe Bend, or Ozark Acres. They manage the lakes, the golf courses, and the additional amenities available to property owners in those towns. So when you contact me and ask me what restrictions there are, that can definitely depend on the location. For example, Cherokee Village as a whole doesn't have an HOA, but if you buy a townhouse, there is a homeowners association. Horseshoe Bend as a whole does not have an HOA, but if you buy a home in the manor section, which is for 55 and older, they have an HOA, and so there's a fee and additional restrictions for both of those. Ozark Acres, which is also known as Williford, it's outside of Hardy, has an SID, which has that as additional assessment, but it doesn't have any HOA, and the SID doesn't have any additional restrictions. So it really depends on what location you want. Now, if you're just wanting to be in north central Arkansas, you want to be close to one of those locations, then you can buy a property outside of it. You can buy a property in Ash Flat, Highland, Hardy. They don't have SIDs, they don't have HOAs, none of them. In any part of those towns do they have an HOA or a POA. Now, I gotta take that back because Hardy, if you buy lakefront property in Hardy on Lake Sherwood or Rainbow Lake, there is a property owners association and there is a fee for that, and they do have additional restrictions if you have property on the lake. So that is one restriction in Hardy, but to my knowledge, Highland and Ash Flat do not. There's other towns around here too that in Sharp, Fulton, and Izard County. Salem doesn't have an HOA, Viola, Violet Hill, Franklin. There's many other towns, and of course areas outside of the town that do not have restrictions. So you can buy property without those restrictions and still enjoy the area. Additionally, if you want access to those lakes, you can still buy a lot, any lot in Cherokee Village and have access to the amenities of the area. So you can have your property in the country where you don't have any restrictions, and you can have your property in the town that you want to have access to the amenities like the lakes and the golf courses. Additionally, to break that down a little bit farther, it probably sounds like it's going to be really expensive, but it really isn't. So let's take a step back. Cherokee Village, for example, your county taxes, I can't tell you what that is because it's going to depend on the square footage and everything like that for a home, but the assessment in Cherokee Village for most lots in Cherokee Village is $90 a year for that assessment. That's not expensive. Some of the lots, for some reason, are assessed slightly lower, and so it's only $72. However, if you buy property on the lake, it can be up to $740 per lot that you own on the lake. And if that lot is vacant, if it's just doesn't have a house or it isn't improved, then it can be as high as $340. I believe that a lot of the townhouses are assessed at $340 for the SID assessment. So you're getting county taxes, the SID assessment, and the homeowners association in those townhouses. So that's something to be aware of. So that's approximately what it would be for an SID assessment in Cherokee Village. Horseshoe Bend is a little bit different. Again, you'll still have the county taxes, and then you'll have an SID tax. It used to be about $100, but I think they've actually dropped it down to $50, and it's just across the board. They just have a blanket SID. It doesn't matter the size of your property or where it is, you just have an SID fee of $50. Ozark Acres is also different than both of those. They have an SID office, they have the county taxes, and then they have an SID tax, and that is completely dependent on, I think it's based on the front footage of the lot. So it's usually about 125, 130, could be slightly less, could be slightly more. So anyway, just to give you an idea, it's still only $50 to $100, $125 for that annual SID assessment for the communities in our area, and none of those SIDs have additional restrictions. And then there's the townhouses and the manor homes that do, and the lakefront property in Hardy that do have the HOAs and the POAs. So there are some in the area, but most of the time they do not have an HOA. Now I can understand why someone wouldn't want an HOA in their area, to be own a house in an HOA, knowing that someone has the right to tell you what to do. They can tell you what color of the mailbox, the color of the exterior of your house, how high you can cut your grass, if you can have a garage. I can totally understand why you wouldn't want someone telling you to do that. But the reason that I might want an HOA, I've never had one, so I can't say that I would, but the reason I might want an HOA is so that I know that a manufactured home isn't going to be built across from my stick-built home and bring my property values down. That would be one reason not to have to want an HOA in your area, to help those restrictions help increase your property values and maintain them so that the other properties around yours don't bring it down. And that's also why people like to have regulations about maintaining your lawn so that you can't let it get a foot high and again bring the property values down in your area. But if it costs you money and it has restrictions and you have to go to them every time you want to do a single thing to your property, I can understand why you wouldn't want an HOA. Now that we've talked about POAs and HOAs and taxes and SID and assessments and this and that and the other thing, I want to talk to you a little bit more about BOAs, because that goes back to the restrictions. When you contact me and you want to buy, for example, a lot in Cherokee Village and buy a tiny home, I'll say, well, I don't know. It depends on what the bill of assurance says. And then that's a BOA, is what I call a BOA. And they are maintained at our county offices, and every subdivision has a different bill of assurance. Now, in that bill of assurance, I'm going to put a link in the description below so you can get an idea. Most of them are very similar. They're going to talk about the setbacks from the property lines. You have 25 foot from the front, 25 foot from the back, 15 on the side, something like that. Most of these are designed to be when you're actually building the home. So usually it doesn't really affect you once the home has been built and you're moving into it, or you're transferring ownership from one seller to one buyer. But it can provide restrictions. Like I said, it's going to have a minimum square footage. That is the biggest difference between our bills of assurance. I've seen anything from as low as 600 to up to 1200. So 600 is pretty small. So when you call me and say, hey, can I build a tiny home? Then I'm going to be like, well, what's a tiny home to you? Because some people might call a tiny home 1,000 square feet. So in Cherokee Village, that is allowed in many subdivisions. And then it goes into, what do you want to make your tiny home out of? Are you going to make it out of a shipping container? Or are you going to build it from hand? Are you talking about bringing a shed in? So then you have to get into a little bit more detail. Modular homes are allowed in all areas of Cherokee Village. Manufactured homes are only allowed in certain subdivisions. So it does depend on what your material you're wanting to build your home out of, and that's why lots of times I have to tell you to call planning and zoning and say, I don't know all the details, even though I'm on the commission. I don't know all the details of what would be required for you to build a home, depending on the size that you want it. So that is the biggest difference between one bill of assurance to another, is the minimum square footage. Most all of them say it can't be larger than 2 stories, you can only have one garage, and things like that. Also, most all of them say that there is no livestock allowed. That's going to be in Horseshoe Bend and Cherokee Village. There are a couple subdivisions in Ozark Acres that you can have, that are unrestricted, and you can have livestock and you can have mobile homes in those subdivisions. So that would also be what's in there about the manufactured homes, and that would help you understand what you can put there. So that bill of assurance is something that was recorded when the subdivision was created. That is one reason why we can't have chickens legally in Cherokee Village, because the only way that you can get rid of a bill of assurance is by a judge's order. You have to have like 75% of the people in the subdivision agree to change it. So it can be very difficult. So those bills of assurance are for every subdivision in all of our locations. Some places do not have a bill of assurance, if it's not recorded at the courthouse, then we can't really tell you what the restrictions are, then you're not really going to have anything to follow. And that's why if you're not wanting something restricted, then you probably want to be out of the country. Now, just because the property doesn't have a BOA doesn't mean that it doesn't have restrictions, because you're still going to have city ordinances to follow. And that again is why I often refer you to the city website or the planning and zoning organization, because they are going to be knowing what's been recently passed by city council, what's going to be under consideration for city council, and changes are made every month, or maybe not every month do they make an ordinance change, but at least annually they make changes to ordinances. And some of the things that are in our ordinances, I know one thing that we changed last year was about solar panels and the types of solar panels that are allowed and where they can be put, and you know, certain different things like that. There's also, we made a change about outbuildings. You can have one outbuilding and it can be a certain percentage of the size of your home, the size of the lot that you're putting it on. So there are different regulations within the city that are not part of the bill of assurance. So most of the time when you're looking to buy property inside of a city, within the city limits, you're going to have some type of restrictions, because it's a city and they have those ordinances in place to make sure that it continues to be in working order and everyone's treated fairly and everybody has the same rules. So that's why you want to make sure that you contact the city, especially if you're planning on building on your lot, but also if you're just going to be buying a property that's already built, because you could be thinking, oh, I'm just going to buy this house and I'm going to change the square footage, I'm going to change the floor plan, I'm going to add on a garage, I can put a shed in the backyard. That may not fall under the city ordinances. So again, you want to make sure that you contact them. Sometimes we have the answers to your questions, and sometimes we can tell you what to look for. We can send you a reference point to look it up. But lots of times we have to refer you to the city so you can get the details that you need to make sure it's a place that you want to be. So the question is no HOA right for you? There's no right or wrong answer. It just depends on your personality and priorities. Do you crave complete control over your creative expression in your living space? Then exploring no HOA options might be a game changer. Luckily, there are tons of resources available and tons of opportunities available, but you're going to have your own set of problems and possibly having to search for utilities available when you get outside of the area with no restrictions. That's often what I found, is that someone that is looking for something with no restrictions is that there's no utilities available, because the cities have the infrastructure to bring the power and the water and the sewer into place. So once you get outside of town, then you're more likely to not have access to that. For example, I have a couple lots north of Hardy, absolutely no restrictions whatsoever. You can tent camp, you can set up a commune, do whatever you want, but there's not really a road to it. There's no septic, no sewer, no water. You'd have to put your own well in, and it's only 1/10 of an acre. There is power. So that's what you have to keep in mind when you run into these places that have the restrictions. You have to decide what's more important, that I have running water or that I be able to do whatever I want. Sometimes it might be okay if you have a few restrictions. At the end of the day, your home should be a reflection of you. Whether you love the structure of an HOA or crave the freedom of no restriction, the most important thing is a living situation that makes you happy. We all need to be looking for joy. But hey, if you're curious about exploring no HOA options, there's a whole world out there waiting to be discovered. I have plenty of opportunities for you to have a property without an HOA. So make sure to check out my video about the pros and cons of Arkansas. And if you have any questions about which properties have HOA or no HOA, make sure you reach out to me. Thanks for watching and have a blessed day.